When I ended my last video, little did I know that just a day later, Virginia Giuffre, the brave young woman who exposed Jeffrey Epstein and his cabal of powerful men, including royalty, would allegedly end her life on her farm outside of Perth, Australia. The circumstances of her death, however, remain a mystery. Although it's been ruled a suicide, the cause of death still hasn't been released to the public. But not everyone is on board with this neatly packaged media narrative. Virginia's father has come out forcefully denying that his daughter was suicidal. He believes, in his own words, that somebody got to her. Similarly, Virginia's attorney expressed her own doubts, and shortly after her death was announced, this IG post surfaced from back in 2019, just 2 months after Epstein's own dubious suicide, wherein she states, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I suicidal. If something happens to me, in the sake of my family, do not let this go. Too many people want to see me quieted." Now, Epstein died allegedly by suicide, it was reported, while he was awaiting trial in a Manhattan jail just months before Virginia posted this message, which means that even though the prime target of the sex trafficking investigation was gone, Virginia still felt that her life was in danger. But as we shall see, Epstein's sphere of influence extended across the globe like the tentacles of an octopus. It was said that he could make anyone disappear. But there are many who believe that it was actually his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was actually the mastermind. It was Maxwell who introduced Epstein to the rarefied world of the ultra elite. She had long been a regular in aristocratic circles, and she had made royal connections from all the way back in the 1980s when she first befriended the Duke of York. Andrew may have known Epstein from as far back as the early 90s. Flight logs would show him visiting the infamous Epstein Island in 1999. Now, suicide and overdose seems to be a common occurrence among individuals who find themselves mixed up in the company of these powerful people. It seems, at least to me, to be a convenient cover for their being dispatched. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell is a story all her own. Intrigue and subterfuge were no strangers to her from early on in her life. Maxwell was the daughter of Robert Maxwell, a former member of the UK Parliament and media mogul who at one point owned the New York Daily News and the Mirror. She also attended Marlborough College, the same college attended by the Middleton sisters. She was said to be his favorite child, and he lavished her with extravagant gifts, including a yacht named after her. But Robert Maxwell was living a double life. He lived well beyond his means and found himself facing insurmountable debt, which he kept hidden until his death. His daughter, Ghislaine, was his right arm. He at one point involved her in a plot to embezzle over $200 million from the Berlitz Group. The next year, Robert sent Ghislaine to New York to launch a new business venture while he flew to Moscow. He was later found dead, floating in the sea near his yacht in the Canary Islands. Did he jump? Or was he pushed? It's hard to know, especially when you get to understand the type of character Robert Maxwell was. Now, after he died, the secrets came bubbling to the surface. It was discovered that he had been raiding the pension funds of his employees to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds. His sons were forced to liquidate what was left of his empire. By this time, Ghislaine was now a young adult in New York City, alone and broke. Epstein, who had been a friend of her father's, became her lifeline. Thanks to him, she was soon back to living the lavish lifestyle she had been accustomed to. Just as she did with her father, she continued her now well-versed practice of acquiring wealth using dubious means. means. She would manage his many properties and eventually become his procurer, recruiting girls as young as 14 into his trap with promises of cash and lucrative opportunities. Maxwell would recruit girls, offering cash for every other girl they recruited. An inveterate snob, no surprise there, considering the circles in which she was raised, Maxwell showed no mercy to her vulnerable victims, at one point referring to them as trash. Maxwell had a specific target: troubled and vulnerable girls from broken homes. Girls such as Virginia. Virginia's story is one defined by exploitation and suffering. She was born Virginia Louise Roberts in 1983 in Sacramento, California. By the time she was 4, she and her family had moved to Florida. Instability and trauma would soon define her youth. At the age of 7, she was SA'd by a family friend. This event would cascade into a series of traumatic encounters and toxic acquaintances. Her father worked as a maintenance man at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, a connection that would prove fateful years later. By age 13, Virginia was living on the streets. She had run away, been kidnapped, and sold into sex trafficking by a known pedophile named Ronald Eppinger. She had spent the better part of her teenage years in foster homes, group homes, and shelters. And when she finally landed a job as a spa attendant at Mar-a-Lago, it seemed like a lifeline. In 1999, at just 15, Virginia was approached by British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell. The proposition was simple: work as a private masseuse for her billionaire boyfriend, Jeffrey Epstein. What followed was a living nightmare. Virginia was groomed, abused, and trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell to a network of powerful men. She was flown across states and international borders. From 1999 to 2002, she lived in a gilded prison, forced to perform S-acts in Epstein's various homes: his Manhattan townhouse, his Palm Beach mansion, his New Mexico ranch, and the now infamous private island known as Little St. James. He seemed to have an unlimited supply of money that no one ever really knew how he earned. It was thought that he was a savvy finance guru, but the truth is he had no great financial acumen. Epstein was in fact a college dropout. The true source of his wealth was derived from his associations with very wealthy individuals with the help of his facilitator. He leveraged his high-profile connections, luring powerful men into a web of secrecy, depravity, and ultimately blackmail. This was how he was able to accrue such vast amounts of wealth in such a short period. Epstein and Maxwell offered a very unique service: a playground for the rich to indulge in their deepest, darkest fantasies with no regard for the lives they destroyed in the process. Even today, the media still refers to many of his victims as prostitutes, a lie intended to impugn their characters by distorting the narrative. Virginia first met Prince Andrew when she was only 17. The encounter took place in Ghislaine Maxwell's Belgravia townhouse. The now infamous photo captures a young Virginia in a crop top and low-rise jeans, Prince Andrew's hand firmly around her waist, and Maxwell grinning in the background. Maxwell would later claim that the photo is a fake. That image would later become the centerpiece of one of the most explosive scandals in modern royal history. Virginia alleged that she was ordered by Maxwell and Epstein to have relations with the prince on at least 3 different occasions. Prince Andrew denied everything, claiming he beef and soon after his fall from grace. But Virginia wasn't done. In the early 2010s, as new investigations into Epstein's past began to gain traction, Virginia went public. She filed a defamation suit against Maxwell and named names in legal filings: politicians, billionaires, attorneys, and the Duke of York. Her courage cracked something open. Epstein was arrested again in 2019, followed by Maxwell, who was found hiding out in one of her numerous properties bought for her by Epstein. In 2021, Virginia filed a civil suit against Prince Andrew in New York, alleging the sexual assault that happened when she was 17. The following year, the prince settled the case out of court for a reported £12 million. The palace insisted no public funds were used, but few believed that. The reputational fallout was catastrophic. Andrew was stripped of his military honors and patronages and all but vanished from royal life. That same year, Maxwell was given a sentence of 20 years in prison for her role in the human trafficking of young girls. It seemed the nightmare had ended, but for Virginia, it was just beginning. By 2023, Virginia had moved to Australia with her husband and children. She had built a life of relative calm. Then came the dramatic reports a few weeks ago where she was hospitalized under strange circumstances. Virginia claims she was hit by a bus traveling at a high speed while being a passenger in a car driven by an older woman. She posted this image on her Instagram account where she is pictured bruised and battered with injuries that look more like she had been beaten. In fact, the bus driver claims that Virginia was not even in the car. He claims that the accident was minor and that the bus was traveling at a slow speed, barely swiping the car. Virginia also claimed that she had gone into renal failure and had only 4 days to live. When the news came out, the immediate reaction from the press was skepticism. They brought up the fact that in recent months, Virginia had been embroiled in a custody battle with her husband, Robert Giuffre, whom she had met while in Thailand when she was training to get a masseuse license. It turns out that Epstein and Maxwell had decided to send her there after getting her to agree to become their surrogate. Maxwell, it seems, was desperate to have a child with Epstein, and I guess for some reason she was not able to. But Virginia saw this as her means to finally escape from their clutches. She was married just days later to Robert and moved to Australia until her recent tragic passing. Now, Juliet Bryant, another Epstein survivor, has given her own harrowing account of her experience on Epstein Island when she was 20 years old. She too has, by the way, publicly preempted her own denials of suicidal ideation. She spoke of many strange rituals that occurred, things she's too afraid to talk about, but one of the things she mentioned was Epstein's plan to harvest the ovaries of his young female victims. This may have something to do with the burgeoning pro-natalist movement, something we have seen recently in certain billionaires. Now, the pro-natalism movement is the belief that humanity must urgently increase its birth rate. It is often framed as a rational response to plummeting global fertility rates and the aging population. But this movement carries darker historical and ideological echoes. Beneath its surface lies a convergence of eugenics, racial supremacy, and what may be a quasi-secret society devoted to engineering the future of humanity. At the center of this movement is a cadre of tech billionaires, venture capitalists, and transhumanists whose vision for humanity may resemble more of a breeding program, echoing the Lebensborn program implemented by the Nazis, where a specific type of woman was encouraged and even incentivized to have as many children as possible. And we've seen recent examples of this with Viktor Orban and Trump with their recent proposals to incentivize women to give birth. Now, folks, get ready to slide deep down into the rabbit hole with me. Now, Bryant claims that Epstein and Maxwell ran this secret society on his secluded island in the Virgin Islands, where labs were set up to harvest the women's eggs for the purpose of cloning. That's right. It turns out Epstein was interested in cloning technology from as early as the 90s. This secret society became known as the Butterfly Trust, apparently due to the shape of a woman's pelvis resembling that of a butterfly. But the Butterfly Trust would also be the name of the financial scheme where Epstein would stash away his millions in order to avoid the massive payouts due to the victims from civil forfeiture. He used the funds in this trust to pay off his co-conspirators, buying their silence. Now, when the accident was announced, the press was quick to use words like paranoid. They also brought up the restraining order her husband had filed against her. It was obvious the press was planting the seeds in the public's mind that Virginia was crazy in order to impugn her character. And if they could get the gullible public to believe that, then they could possibly get them to believe that Andrew was really innocent. This strategy is nothing new. The British press, in tandem with the royal family, has been operating this unholy cabal for years. Perhaps this is the real meaning of the term the invisible contract. They did it to Diana in the year leading up to her death, her own son, William, even calling her paranoid. They did it to Sarah Ferguson after her divorce from Andrew. The Yorks, by the way, have always been strapped for cash. Charles, being the heir, has long wielded his unearned wealth as a way to keep his family under tight control, giving them just enough support to get by and using the security apparatus to keep them under control. Which brings me to my next story. Recently, Harry lost his appeal to receive security for himself and his family while in the UK. The palace struck back, claiming they could not intervene and that the Sussexes were no longer entitled to security because they are no longer working royals. But interestingly, Ravik still provides support to Andrew, even though he is no longer a working royal. This tells me one thing. The firm is a prison from which there is no escape. At least not alive, and Harry knows a lot more than what the sycophants who continue to blindly support these slimy people do. His life and the life of his family is in danger. In many ways, what is happening to Harry is connected to all the mysterious deaths. When you find yourself involved in this unholy cabal, even through no fault of your own, you do not dare divulge anything that happened to you. Cross the line and you will be hunted. This is why Virginia felt her life was in danger. She dared to speak out, telling her story, naming names. And folks, what the press does not want you to know is that Ghislaine Maxwell was much closer to the royal family than the public realizes. They would like to have us believe that she was only close to Andrew, but Ghislaine was in fact a regular at the palace, even meeting with the Queen. And according to one victim, Maxwell apparently hated Princess Diana. One year, Epstein even attended one of the York sisters' birthday party. And of course, we know about the well-documented close connection between then Prince Charles and the notorious pedophile Jimmy Savile. At the same time the scandal broke out, the monarchy was reeling from the fallout of the departure of Harry and Meghan, facing accusations of racism and indifference with the echoes of Princess Diana, who spoke out against the monarchy's cruelty. She died shortly after fleeing paparazzi in a tunnel where no cameras worked that night. The British monarchy was now linked to international sex trafficking allegations and allegations of racism. The palace went into damage control. They would employ their age-old strategy of deploying their minions in the press to poison the public's minds against Harry and Meghan, much like they did to Diana and Virginia. On social media, Virginia suggested that her life might be in danger. She spoke of surveillance, of people following her, of high-powered individuals who don't like it when secrets come to light. The implication is clear. Anyone who dares to challenge royal power will find themselves isolated, discredited, and ultimately erased. And she hinted that there's more to the story that she hasn't told. And now that she's been silenced, questions linger. What happens to people who know too much? Which brings me to my final story. All this week, the press has been test driving a new narrative. It seems the public isn't buying the antidepressant angle that much, and now they're claiming that Kingston was facing massive debts. And folks, it's just so convenient that poor Thomas Kingston isn't here to refute any of these reports. And let me just be unequivocal here. I don't believe a word of it. The British press is just a bit too cozy with the royal family. And I think they're still trying to cover something up. I don't know what it is yet. This may have something to do with Harry sounding the alarm. And I believe it's much more serious than the public realizes. I wanted to do a deep dive into what happened to Virginia actually before she it was announced that she passed away, of course conveniently by suicide. Why is it that so many people who are close to the royal family, and who cross the line somehow, seem to end up, I don't know, they seem to end up dead by suicide? Suicide seems to be a convenient way of getting rid of a problem, especially in light of the situation with Prince Harry and the revelations that his family actually actively appealed to foreign countries not to provide security to him. It's like they're going out of their way to put his life in danger. And the media is pretty much doing to him what they did to his mother and what they did to Virginia. They're trying to say that he's paranoid. They're trying to say that he's unhinged and that he's crazy. And this is just a classic strategy that they have been using. They've been doing for a long time now. Using the press to influence people's minds, to try to humiliate him and to, I don't know, to get their revenge on him. I don't know, what is it they want? Does this family want to see Harry and his family offed? It seems that way to me. It's clear that they're stalking them. That is pretty obvious. And anyway, this whole situation really made me think about Kate being missing last year. And in light of all this, I think it's a pretty plausible theory that she may have tried to get away from them. The reality is that there is no escaping this family. There is just no escaping this family alive. Um, do I think what about the Thomas Kingston is another situation? I'm sorry, but they keep coming up with, every 6 months, they're coming up with another reason why this man supposedly killed himself. It was well known that he was a brilliant guy. He seemed to have his head on his shoulders. He was very reliable. He spent time in Iraq. This guy was like not your unstable, unhinged type of person. I'm sorry, I will never buy that Thomas Kingston committed suicide. I don't believe it. They are covering up for something. And it's just so convenient that every 6 months they're coming up with another reason why he killed himself. And also interestingly, Lady Gabriella moved right back into Kensington Palace immediately after his death. So is it all connected? I think so. I think anybody who finds themselves in close proximity with a royal family. I don't know, it's like they have to swear some kind of omerta of silence. They can't say anything. You're not allowed to leave. They don't really care if you do something bad. The point is they just don't want you to leave, right? So Andrew is the worst of the worst, but he didn't leave. He's still there. So he still gets their protection. Even though he's humiliated, they despise him, and he's treated like a worm, because he is a worm. It doesn't matter, and he still gets protection because at least he didn't leave. It's just so interesting to me. I saw today in the press several headlines comparing Prince Harry's recent BBC interview with Andrew's Newsnight interview. This is just unbelievable to me. They are trying to place Harry into the same category as Andrew. This is a mind-blowing level of smearing, of an assassination of one's character. It's deplorable that family would do that. That family members would do that. I would not wish this on my worst enemy. I don't care what you think about Harry. He's still Charles's son. Does he not have any compassion at all for his son? It's like he doesn't care if anything happens to him. And I think that must be a very sobering realization for Harry. He still loves his family. This is who he grew. He grew up with this family. He can't just forget about them. It's part of his family is part of his psyche. It's part of his foundation. So it's very easy for a bystander to say, oh, he should just leave them alone. He should just forget about them. It's not as easy for him. It's not as easy for him to walk away from his toxic family members. He's the only one acting like an adult. He's the only one saying, look, I want to reconcile here. And they're just treating, they practically want him dead. Despite what the British press says, he's not trying to get back into the fold. He just wants to know that he and his family are safe. And people are acting like he's crazy for wanting that. The cruelty that people are showing to Harry just because they don't like who he married. Let's face it, that's what this is about. And the fact that they had the audacity to leave. You're not allowed to leave, apparently. Anyway, thank you so much for the super thanks. Let me know your thoughts. Like and share the video. Let's get to 2,000 subscribers, guys. Like and share the video, and I'll catch you all in the next video.